Hi, everyone. This is Belle with Pop Culture Uncovered, and I am here with Eric, one of our amazing writers. If you have not been checking out his High Republic pieces, you should be on the website because they are fantastic and they give a nice deep dive into what the Jedi were like before the fall, basically. So you should definitely read them. Eric, how you doing?
I am doing great. Thank you for having me, Belle. This is awesome because we haven't done this before. So
We
I'm
haven't.
super excited about this. Absolutely.
I'm glad. So
Yeah.
we're just gonna get into it. Rings of Power has ended. I'm sad. I'm
Oh, me
genuinely
too.
sad.
Oh, me
I'm
too.
like, oh my god, we're gonna have to wait a year. I know
Yeah.
they're already in production for season 2, but still, it's just like I just need more. So before we get into the actual performances and the actual storylines, let's talk about the things with the show, the technicalities. One of the things I noticed about this show was how cinematic it looked. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I mean, they knocked this out of the park when it comes to the cinematography and just the combination of using the sound stages and the green screen along with just the natural beauty of New Zealand was
Yes,
just incredible. Um, I mean, everything looked like it felt like Middle Earth. It
yes,
and
yes,
it felt like it came right off of the pages of Tolkien's books.
yes,
Um, and we're gonna get into a little bit of how the characters look, but everybody looked like they belonged, especially in those big swooping shots and everything. And if there's one thing that this show is, it is a beautiful show. It
it's
is absolutely
gorgeous to look at.
gorgeous. Oh, it
One of the
is.
things I noticed was that they're usually with shows like this, high fantasy shows, you can see the moment. I don't know how to explain it in layman's terms, but you can see the bleed, if that makes sense. You can see the bleed between when it goes from real locations to CGI.
Yeah.
And in this show, I never once saw the bleed.
I
From the first opening sequence with the fire, the dragons, and the battle, I didn't see a bleed. Does that make sense?
It does, but I saw a little bit of it in that first episode.
Okay.
It's when Arondir and the I'm forgetting what the elf commander of that watch, because they never
Yes.
really said his name. Um
Yeah.
they're looking out over the Southlands, and from there you can see a little bit of the bleed. Just a little bit of the bleed, not much.
See, I would have thought that there was more because, well, I was going to say, at first I thought it was the cave troll, but on rewatch, I'm like, nope, the cave troll looks great. It looks great. The only one where I kind of saw the CGI a little bit for me was that warg that when Arondir was kidnapped
Oh yeah.
and the wargs being released was the only time I ever actually saw the CGI. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? And even then, it was still terrifying.
Yeah.
Which is one of my favorite things about the show, which was an unexpected thing, was the jump scares.
Oh yeah.
There were a lot of jump scares in this show. There were a couple of times I was like, "Oh dear Lord, okay," and I wasn't prepared.
Yeah. I mean, and that's also the beauty of the show is one episode is a film noir, and then the
Yes,
next episode is a straight up horror movie. Yeah.
yes. But it all tied together really well. We're going to get into that later about the storylines, but they all tied together really well, the disparate threads of the show. And one of the things I think that they did really well was use the landscape to help tell the story. It's kind of like how in the Spider-Man films, the most recent ones, and the original ones, and the Andrew Garfield ones, New York was almost as much a part of the story
Yeah.
as everything else. This felt like the choices that they made helped enhance the story. The locations helped enhance the story. And so it worked really well. Another thing I really liked were the costuming. The costumes were absolutely, the detail, they were stunning. Like Tarmiriel's fish scale armor and all of the Numenorians' fish scale armor was such a nice, subtle touch. Instead of it being chain link or chainmail, that it was instead fish scales, because they are a maritime kingdom. And it was just a nice little touch. Or my favorite costume piece, hands down, of all of the costume pieces, is Arondir's armor.
Oh yeah.
The it on the front.
Yeah.
I just love that. It just is so visually striking. On the front.
Yeah.
I just love that. It just is so visually striking for me. Was there a favorite costume piece for you?
I would have to say I have two.
Okay.
One of them is Galadriel's armor when she's like with the Numenorians and everything, and just like how much it honors like the elven culture.
Yes.
And I just want to, before I say my second one, I just want to say, like, these costumes look like it was a combination of the stuff that Peter Jackson and his team did for that original Rings trilogy, and like they just made it their own thing, which I thought was brilliant. Yes. But yeah, Galadriel's armor, and then I would have to say I love Prince Durin's just like utilitarian look, you know, just because he's a man of the people, and like it shows that he's a man of the people. Yes.
Yeah. There was a little thing that I noticed that with Diza, speaking of Durin, and first of all, can we just talk about how much we love Durin and Diza? Because I do. I love them so much. They're so adorable, and I love them so much. Diza's outfits all had gold on them. And it's a very subtle thing, but it was woven into, including the golden thread that was woven into every outfit. But one of the things I noticed was that even her eyes are gold.
Yes.
And I did not catch that until I rewatched it. I'm like, I just love that choice.
It's very subtle. That choice.
It's so subtle. Yeah. And I was like, the actress up, who I didn't know was apparently pregnant during filming. And I'm like, girl, that's a lot. Okay. So, yeah. And I was like, is that her natural eye color? But it wasn't. And I was like, that's such a smart, subtle choice.
Oh, yeah.
To have that. And it also shows that despite how much I love Durin and Diza, that this is definitely Durin the Fourth, who dug too far.
Yeah.
Who dug too far and too deep.
We're going to get there. We are going to get there.
We see the subtle things in the show that lead to what we know is coming are very well done. I'm going to be very interested to see how they go forward with that story, because I don't know if they knew that Durin and Diza were going to be such fan favorites. And I don't know a single person who doesn't love them. And I'm like, well...
I mean, you know, it's also one of those things too where like I'm not really a fan of the Hobbit trilogy that Peter Jackson did, but I love every single dwarf in those movies.
Yes.
Because of just their characters, right? And that's what I get with Durin and Diza here, where it felt like they just honored that legacy, but just being themselves, and they're perfect, and I can't wait to see more from Khazad-dûm. Like, I love that place. I love
seeing it before it fell apart, because we've never actually seen Khazad-dûm at its height. No. And now we're seeing it at its height. We've never even gotten real descriptions of it in the books, if you think about it. We've never really gotten, even in the Silmarillion, we never really get full descriptions of what the grandeur of that place is.
No.
So the fact that we're getting this beautiful inside look into this world and how the doors work and their culture in a way that we've never truly gotten before. We got a little bit of it in the Hobbit trilogy, but but even then, not really, because they were a fallen nomadic tribe at that point. And so it was them trying to reclaim their former glory. We've never seen them at their height. So to see this kingdom and the way it moves and just the choices, although again, as I said while watching it, Star Wars and Lord of the Rings need to understand guardrails. Yes. They're your friends.
They do. But I wanna say this real quick, because like you talk about the descriptions of these places. Mm-hmm. Tolkien never really describes any places in detail, because he wants he lets the reader imagine it, and that is the brilliance of Tolkien. Exactly. He lets the reader imagine it, and that is the brilliance of Tolkien as a writer, because you can see any location as you want. Like, he describes the Shire pretty well to what we get in the movies, but and even like with the Harfoots and like where they're going, because honestly that is the Shire, like where they end up, like at the end of the season. But like those are the only places like that he really describes. Everywhere else, he outside of Helm's Deep, because he talks about Helm's Deep, but everywhere else he leaves it to your imagination, and that is so brilliant of these creators, just to be like, how would Tolkien picture this, or how would we picture this? And it's incredible. Absolutely.
It also gives them a lot of leeway in what they can and cannot do. Yes. And so that's also extremely smart, because you don't have to, you can't, well, I mean, there's people, as we well know, there are people who are going to complain no matter what. Which is one of those things that always amuses me about the complaints about the characters of color. And I was like, y'all didn't seem to have an issue with the characters of color, with the hobbits being all white.
Yeah.
When they're not described like that in the books.
No.
There's not one hobbit. There's not one brown hobbit in those movies, in either set of movies. And I'm like, but that's not how they're described. Even the Bashki, animation made sure that they were brown.
Yeah.
But we never, but we don't see a brown hobbit, and they're filming in New Zealand where there's a huge native population that they could have pulled from, and they chose not to. So I'm like, I can tell that your complaints are not based on fealty.
Well, that and like, let's stick to the hobbits real quick, because and their look. The Harfoots look exactly the way that Tolkien describes them, outside of like Nori. Nori is a little bit paler than the other Harfoots, but they are hobbits. Yeah. Those are the way the hobbits look. They're dirty. They're dark skinned. They, like, they're people of the earth. And like, yeah. And like for like people to complain about dark-skinned people or people of color being these various characters, number one, you need to stop just being racist and grow up. And number two, you need to go outside and touch the grass. Like that's how I feel. Like, go outside and touch the grass.
That's fair. Yeah. Well, speaking of the Harfoots, let's get into these storylines. Yeah. So I want to start with the Harfoots, because I thought that was a very, of all of the storylines, it is the, for lack of a better term, quietest.
It is, and I thought it was going to be the weakest, but it ended up being pretty much the strongest story.
Yes.
Yeah.
That one, and I feel, in my personal opinion, the Arondir, Brownwind, Theo storyline, those two were, for me, the strongest storylines.
Yes.
But for different reasons, but we'll get into it. But for the Harfoots, I felt we got a really good look at the Hobbit culture in a way that we've kind of seen it But this was an extreme deep dive into how they survived. And I kept thinking while I was watching the show that in some ways, had they not settled in Hobbiton, in the Shire, that they would have survived. They would not have, the burning of the Shire, they would not have been as affected.
No.
If that makes sense.
No.
And so I think throwing away those old ways, and we see that that is how they've survived. Mm-hmm. Now, they can fight. We saw that in the final 2 episodes. They can fight. They will fight, pushed. But that's not their nature. And that nomadic lifestyle kept them alive, kept their traditions strong, kept their families together. In a way, I think that they may have lost something. And I think that there's something to that, because especially considering how much Tolkien was a pro-earth, anti-industrialism, anti-the Industrial Revolution. There is something to be said. I think they really did a good job of showing the benefits of that kind of a lifestyle and how that saves you in some ways from getting pulled into a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah, it shows you that. I just want to ducktail off of that real quick and like expand on that. It shows you that the earth will provide as well, as long as you treat it right, it's going to treat you right. And that's the whole Harfoot thing, where they keep going to these spots because they know like they're going to do right by that spot because the spot has done right by them, if that makes sense, where it's like they have so much respect for that area. And like that's something, like you said, that gets lost because like when you look at Hobbiton and the Shire, it's built up. You know, it's still very natural to what it is, but it's very built up. And like you said, the hobbits seem to have lost their ways. So I'm curious to see what happens in this couple thousand years, because we're still thousands of years out from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, and that is one of the things, like I've heard complaints about the compressed storyline, and we'll get into that. But if they were to do it the way it was written, they would have to do actor jumps every 2 or 3 episodes, the same way they're doing with Hot D, with House of the Dragon.
Yeah.
And that is a disservice to the story, in my opinion. It's one of the reasons I cannot connect with House of the Dragon, because I can't connect with the people who I haven't watched them.
Well,
I haven't connected with them.
That and
I don't want to be becoming House of the Dragon bashing,
but let's just face it, almost every single character in the Game of Thrones universe is a piece of garbage.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing. One of the things about the storyline with the Harfoots, for me, and I think that's why that storyline and the Arondir Brownwyn Theo storyline hit me the hardest, is unlike in a lot of shows like this, not just Game of Thrones, but all of these big shows, where it's like all of these political machinations and the infighting, and this is that and the other. We are seeing how these actions affect the people on ground level, literally, where the Harfoots are concerned.
Yes.
And therefore, the stakes have more meaning.
Yeah, it's very personal stakes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they did such a great job with the story with the stranger, with Nuri and her determination. My favorite relationship is Nuri's relationship with Marigold. I just love their relationship so much. I love how much Marigold is ride or die for her children. I love, even though they're not her biological children, I think that's very important, especially in this day and age, that found and blended families are just as important as families of blood. As I said to Ron, this show hit me the way the first year of Supernatural hit me. It just hit me different. It hit different for me, because that families who, you're still family. You fight, you argue, but in the end, if the love is there, you will come through anything. And that was really what struck me about the Harfoot storyline.
Yeah.
And when her father gave that speech about, are we going to run away? Is that who we are? Are we going to whine and cry? Is that who we are? I was like, I felt that in my soul. It was so good. It was so good. The casting is good. The beauty of, I don't think the Harfoot's costuming, going back to something you said earlier, it gets enough credit.
No, it doesn't.
For how detailed it is.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, no, it does. It makes total sense.
I feel like, go ahead.
It's very of the earth, which is what the whole Harfoot mentality is. And we're going to keep going back to that, especially as we talk about the Harfoots, because that is first and foremost, like, it's about family and it's about earth. And those are the two things. And it looks like they have hand-me-downs too, which is what I love also. Yes. Like, it looks like their clothes are either homemade with what little resources that they have, and they look like they're hand-me-downs.
Yes. Because they conserve. Yeah. They try to make sure that their footprint, no puns intended, is small.
Yeah.
So, because it's not just we love the earth, it's a safety issue.
Yeah.
You know?
It really is.
They can get through the world without being seen for quite some time. And
that's their introduction.
Yeah, I love that introduction too. Yeah. That was fine. That's what I was going to say, because I immediately thought about that scene in the very first scene where we see them, and them just being basically, they're there, but they're invisible. You don't know they're there. You have no idea.
Yeah,
and so I love that, and it goes really well with everything that we know about them from the books. It's just extremely well thought out. I thought the Stranger storyline. Mm-hmm. A lot of people were impatient. And I was like, no, we're going to find out.
Yeah.
I loved it. I had a feeling that he was an Istari. I had a feeling, I didn't think he was a wizard because they came from the ocean.
Yeah.
But him being an Istari makes more sense. Now the question is going to be, and a lot of people think those things are interchangeable, but they're not. But I feel like the show is going to make them interchangeable to keep it from being super confusing.
Yeah.
The question is going to be, is he a blue wizard that we have had named but never actually met? Or is he going to be Gandalf? Because there are a lot of hints that he's Gandalf.
Yeah, but I have a feeling like, granted, these writers have thrown us for a loop quite a bit in this season with misdirection. I think him being Gandalf, I really think it is going to pay off, especially in season 2, possibly season 3, with them like exploring that. My money was also on Saruman. Like, we get a pure Saruman before he's corrupted.
That would actually be genius and even more heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Because to see him as he is now, and to know what he's going to become makes it so much worse. Which is one of the things about the show overall that, again, going to the House of the Dragon thing, yes, I know how this story ends. I know how it ends.
We know what's coming.
But they made me, and this is coming from someone who, if you listen to our regular podcast, which you can find on iTunes or Google Play, but if you listen to our podcast, you would know I did not want to watch the show.
Yeah.
I had no desire to watch the show. Mm-hmm. I was going to give it a chance. Your write-up actually is what made me want to watch the show, because you were so enthused about it.
I'm honored.
As a Tolkien head, who I can see and understand the writing, why people have an issue with it, but I'm going to give it a chance because Eric really liked it, and I trust his judgment. I'm so glad I did. Good job. And it did ask. That's the main reason I watched it. And I really think that they did a good job with honoring the spirit of the books without being slavishly adapted to it, so that even though we know that all these characters are going to have terrible fates in most cases,
Yeah.
or turn into people that we are going to hate,
Yeah.
like just dead ass going to hate it, because they're doing such a good job of making us invested in their day-to-day lives.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care. And whereas with Hot D, I'm like, I know y'all are gonna die, so why should I care?
Yeah. But with this, like one of my favorite things about this show is that even if you know the end game, the final destination for this road, you still can't help but root for these characters. You still can't help but just enjoy the journey. And another thing is like, they don't bash you over the head with who these characters are.
Thank you.
They introduce them, like, now granted, episode 1, you have to have a lot of backstory on Galadriel and her family and stuff. I totally get that. But
and she edited it down because she had 5 brothers.
Yeah, exactly.
Not just one. And they were all murdered.
Exactly. But, they took that and was like, we'll focus on the one brother.
Yeah.
But they never hit you over the head repeatedly with who these characters are. They lay clues and you have to follow the clues, but they never play the audience as dumb.
That's what I was going to say. They respect the audience's intelligence to follow along. And speaking to that, so let's talk about the Galadriel Halbrand storyline. Because
was great
for me, now granted, all of the storylines were done really well.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Absolutely.
For me, that reveal hurt me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, so my husband Ron and I have been watching, and he said, I guessed it in that episode with the fight.
Okay, when he beats up the guys.
The reason he guessed it, when he got jumped in the alley.
Yeah.
The reason he guessed it was that he had disabled all of those people. But he went back to make it worse with 2 of them. The one guy, he broke his arm. He didn't need to break he was already down. He chose to snap his arm. And with the other guy, he chose to slam that guy was down. He chose to slam his face into the wall, and dang, if he didn't kill him, I don't know how he didn't do it.
Yeah.
That was a choice. And Ron said the minute that happened, when those guys were all down and he went back for more, that's when I was like, that son. And I'm like, I didn't catch that at all. And he's totally right. When you rewatch the fight, they were down. It was over. He didn't need to go. He didn't need to keep going hard. He chose to keep going hard. So for me, and what I noticed upon rewatch was he always tells the truth, which I love, 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 love. And the reason I love it is because it goes to the biblical basis for Sauron. And what I mean by that is that Lucifer in the Bible never lies to you. No. He tells you just enough information for you to get yourself in trouble with it.
Yeah.
And then lets you go from there. He told her the truth. I took the medallion off of a dead man. He didn't say how long ago that was. Yep. He told her that when everybody inferred, he just let people make assumptions and he didn't correct them.
Yeah.
And when he was asked directly, he answered truthfully. Yep. But he never once said, I'm the king of the Southlands. Even when Brownwood asked him, straight up, are you the king that we were promised? He doesn't say yes. He says, I am the king of the Southlands. Yep. He doesn't say that he's the king that they were promised. Nope. Those are 2 very different things. But they assume, they infer because they want it so bad.
Yeah.
They want it so bad. And I thought that was so extremely well done. Galadriel, for me, was both the strongest and the weakest link.
Yeah.
Because she was very much Morfydd Clark that did such a dynamite job with the character, with the acting. But Galadriel is very much a walking ball of anger and hate and short-sightedness.
Yeah.
And that led to a whole bunch of drama. And literally the very thing that I just thought with Gil-galad about is he was right. He was 100% right. He was right. She brought it back. Her obsession brought it back. And I was big mad at Gil-galad. I was like, listen up, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Cut it out. She's right. And I said online, I'm like, the thing about Galadriel is that even though she's right, she's such a bag of dicks that nobody wants to listen to her. And they were both right. And that's the beauty of that storyline, is that they're both right. There's no bad guy because they're both right. What did you think of the storyline and the reveal?
So the reveal I thought was just absolutely brilliant, because it's like keep your friends close but keep your enemy closer, and that's exactly what Galadriel did, especially with now Sauron. We can now say, I love the reveal, absolutely love the reveal, because at first I was kind of thinking, oh well, he's gonna be the king before Elendil for Gondor. Because that's what I was thinking at first. Like, he was going to kind of be like the steward of Gondor in a sense, because we know that is coming down the road. But I love their first interaction and how, like, he could have killed her at any moment, but he's like, you know what? I'm going to play the long game with her, and I'm just going to see what happens. And that's exactly what he does. Like, he doesn't lay any traps for her whatsoever. She does it herself.
She willingly flings herself into every trap, every single trap.
It's similar to like the way they did Maul in Clone Wars and Rebels, where he's like, he doesn't set any traps for these people. They just play into everything that he's trying to do, and that's exactly what Sauron's doing.
Yeah. It's very reminiscent of, or I should say the opposite, because one is older than the other, but it's very reminiscent. If you read the Timothy Zahn books for Star Wars, and the Grand Admiral Thrawn, and how he's played, they toned him down a bit for Rebels, but not by much.
Yeah.
But Thrawn never, in the books, if you read those books, the Heir to the Empire, that whole series is phenomenal.
Yes.
If you read those books, Thrawn predicts, he goes to a civilization and he studies their art.
Yep.
And studying their art shows him how they think. So he doesn't necessarily lay traps for people. He accurately predicts, based off of their artwork, what they're going to do. And then he plans 4 or 5 scenarios about how he's going to react, which is what made him the second most dangerous person in the entire empire behind Vader.
Yeah.
Because Vader was also just as intelligent, but Vader's temper took over, whereas Thrawn didn't have that. Halbrand / Sauron reminds me of that. Like, you can see how he ended up doing the amount of damage that he did, just based off of what happened this season. If this is him at a low point, which is the other thing people are forgetting, Halbrand / Sauron, when we meet him in this show, has barely just reconstituted himself from getting his ass whooped 1,000 years before.
Exactly.
Like, this is legit. This is him at his weakest.
Yeah.
And look at all the damage that he caused.
Yeah.
At his weakest. It makes me shudder to think the amount of trouble he's going to wreck in the next 2 or 3 years, because he is literally at his physical weakest that he's been. His powers aren't as strong as they've been. And yet, everywhere he went, he started a whole chain of events of nonsense and chicanery.
and another thing is like, one of my old coworkers at my old job used to say, I don't throw the snowballs, I just make them.
Yes.
And that's sure enough what he does. He's just making the snowballs. And then stepping back.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because, the way he led Celebrimbor was just oof. And the way he played Galadriel.
Yeah.
And he didn't play Muriel. Muriel was always Rory.
Yeah.
But he played Galadriel, and I love Muriel. Can we just talk about how utterly amazing Cynthia Addai-Robinson is as Muriel? Like, everything about her says, I am a queen. Just everything about her physicality. And knowing what I know about what's going to happen to her, I am wrecked. Because I'm just like, oh,
yeah.
I know that her life is about to get really hard. Also, am I the only one that noticed the Ellen Deal Muriel chemistry?
No. I saw that coming from a mile away.
And I don't know why it took me so long. Like, we're at episode 5, and I'm like, oh, he's in love with her. Oh.
And that's how you get baby Aragorn.
I'm like, he's in love with her.
Yeah.
How did I miss this? He's been in love with her from day one. It's the way he looks at her. Oh, and now that she can't see, and I was like, that was a really smart choice. He's more obvious about it now that she can't see his face.
Yeah. Because,
as Ron pointed out, he can't ever act on it. Because he is her head, basically, he's her bodyguard.
Yeah.
He's the head of her shipmaster, and the head of her troops. He can never act on how he feels, which is why this whole storyline that's coming with Farazan and Muriel is going to be a bit not good. It's going to be bad. It's going to be bad because if you've read the books, you know that Muriel is about to go through some things. And she's going to try to save everybody, and her cousin is going to be the worst.
So I want to just touch on books real quick because we're actually about